Hi, Elaine here. Today I'll be sharing the easiest way to automate alternating row colours in Affinity Publisher. Applying alternating row colours is something I'm asked about all the time. Let's see how to do it the clever way. I already have a file set up, but the only reason that I've done that is so I have some global colours and some text styles already available. The first main step is to add a table. The size of this table doesn't matter at all, because my data is coming from Excel. The data is a list of furniture, 20 items, and there is a row that contains header information. We will come back to that later. For the moment, what I'm going to do is to select the 20 items and copy it to the clipboard. Back in Affinity Publisher, as I said, the size of the table doesn't matter. As long as I select at least 2 cells, when I paste the data in, Affinity Publisher takes care of the size of the table. It does add an extra row, which we don't need, so I'll get rid of that before we go any further. And then all I need to do is move this into position. It does need to fill the space between the margins, and it's always a good idea to give the data enough room to breathe. I do want in here that columns C, D and E are a little bit narrower. So using the table panel, in the width, I'm setting that to 20. That will resize that table. I also need column A to be smaller. Let's take that in. And then all I need to do is move it back to the full width. I will be pointing out some gotchas as we work through this. And the first one, to see it, I'm going to make sure I've got the entire table selected. Because this came from Excel, we have a font issue. We have an Aptos issue. So top left-hand corner, where the font is showing, there's a question mark, and that is because Aptos is a Microsoft font, and it may not be made available in other applications on your system. The Office applications have access to it, but the question mark here means that Affinity Publisher does not, and that's the problem. It's solved by applying the table body style. It could also be solved by choosing a different font, but seeing as though I have a text style, that is the best way to fix it. So table body in the text styles panel, and it changes the font to Avenir, and the question mark disappears. I'm going to make some more formatting changes to this table, the first of which is to make sure that the top align is set to middle align. Then I'm going to change the inset because the text is very close to the left-hand edge in each cell. The default inset is 0.4, I'm changing that to 2 and everything just looks better spaced. The next thing I'm going to do is remove all the borders because we're not going to need them. I'm doing that in the table panel. Colour doesn't matter, but in the style I'm turning them off. And while the table looks better styled with no borders, we're going to need to do something to make the data easier to access. And that's the point at which most people decide they would like alternating row colours. Now to do that, I'm going to select the table and click to move into table edit mode. Let's do it the wrong way first, because this is the way most people do it. What I'm doing is holding the command key down and I'm selecting each of the even rows. Then in my table panel, under stroke and fill, I have the option to apply a fill to it. I have my global palette available and I would like this to be the lighter colour, so I would apply it. Once you click away there, that is much easier to read, the data is much easier to access. But it's not without its issues. Unless you are incredibly fortunate in your source data never needing to be changed, which never happens to me, you may have to go in here and make some changes. So let's say that we needed to add something above the desk. So we'll insert a row. We may also need to add something above the couch. So right click and insert row. And now we have problems. The first inserted row has a background colour of blue, but unfortunately the row following it has blue, and with the couch we now have 2 that are white. It gets even worse if you're adding rows en masse. So if we pull this down, it uses the colour of the row above, in this case 22, and now they're all blue. So doing it manually is only a temporary solution. It doesn't work if you need to make changes. I am going to undo those changes. So take us back to a perfectly formatted table. What we need to do is have the ability to add and remove rows and have this automatically update. That is possible. Click the table to select it. You then have, in addition to the table panel, a table formats panel. If you need to access that, you will find them on Window, down to Table, and you have Table and Table Formats. I already have the table formats open. Ensuring that table is selected, use the burger menu, and from there choose Add Format from Selection. And let's see what Affinity Publisher has done for us. So in the lower burger menu, next to the new table format, click that and select Edit Format 1, which is the name that it's given it. The first thing I'm going to do in here is to rename that. And then let's have a look at what we've got. In the structure preview, that is this area here, it's noticed that we have some rows that have no fill, and we also have rows with a blue fill. It's also noticed that they alternate. So the first cell in here has no fill, the second one has a blue fill. That is defined using the cell formats in the column next to the structure preview. And as we select the cell in the structure preview, it selects the cell format that is applied to that cell. For that reason, do not move away from the structure into the cell formats and think, oh, I need to see the cell format for format 4. Because if you do that, yes, you can preview it on the right-hand side, but you've also now applied that to the top cell, which is not what you want. This one is our default row. Instead of calling it format 3, I'm going to change that to row. And this is when it's most likely to happen that you're going to click that cell format, because I need to rename format 4 to row alt. Don't select it in the cell formats, select it in the structure. That automatically selects it in the cell formats, and in there I can then name that row alt, which is the alternate row colour. Now let's have a look at what we've actually got. Our row is called row. We have no fill in it, we have no border on it. Our insets we specified have come through, the vertical positioning has come through, and the fact that I applied a text style called table body has also come through. Now selecting that second cell, which automatically shows you the cell format row alt, you can see we have a fill colour of blue, we have no border, we have insets of 2, vertical position in the middle, and that also is table body. So the only changes I made in here were just to make it a little bit easier in terms of renaming things so I know what applies where. Other than that, I didn't make any changes. So we'll OK that. If that solves the problem, we should be able to repeat what we did before, but have it working properly. So let's insert some rows. Oh no, it's not working. What happened? We did everything right. We just missed one step. So I'm going to undo that. What was the one step that we missed? We created a new table format. What we didn't do was apply it. It does not apply automatically. So make sure you have the table selected. You need to apply this style. You can do that from the burger menu with apply followed by the name of the style, or you can just click it. Now in this circumstance, it doesn't look like it made that much difference. But trust me, it did. Now it applies. So in here, select your row, insert a row, and we'll go and select a standard row and insert a row. And it's automatically updating. Even better, if we add a lot of rows at the bottom, they are formatted correctly. And that is because we now have a table format defined, and Affinity Publisher knows how we want that table to look. If that is all you need, you're good to go. But if you want to learn more, hang around. So one thing I haven't done so far, this table doesn't have any headers. But we know that the Excel data had headers. So if I insert a row at the very top and then go back to the data in Excel and I select my data from in here and copy that, and back in my table, just paste the data in. How far wrong could we go? Well, glad you asked. What has happened is it's put the data in correctly. The data is in the correct place. It's also managed to delete what was in cell A2 for reasons best known to itself. What I do, now it's obvious in this circumstance that what's missing is ref 001. But if you can't remember what that was and you don't particularly want to undo and all the rest of it, this is a better bet. If I undo, instead of adding one row, if I add another and then paste the data in, then all I need to do is delete that second row and nothing gets overwritten. So far, so good. Now, this top heading row needs to be formatted, and the best place to format it is inside our table format. So back to editing the table format. Now it's a third type of cell. We don't want it to have a white background. We don't want it to have the alternate colour. We want it to have a completely different background. You need to add an extra row. So clicking the button adds that extra row. The top cell is going to be our header. But notice as I select that, the cell format applied is the row cell format. The blue one has the row alt format, and actually this is the new one we've added, and that says default, which is not correct. But we can fix all of that. Clicking that top cell, which is our header, I'm going to make a completely new cell format. This one I'm going to call header. And then I will use the settings below to define what I want that to look like. Choosing my dark accent colour for that. We don't need a border, so I'm selecting all the borders and turning them off. Then I want the insets to match the rest of the table, so changing those to 2. Changing the vertical position to middle. And at the moment it has a format of table body, which means the text is black. It would look better if the text was white. And as it happens, I have another style for the headings in my table, and that will make it white. So the preview is showing us the impact of everything I've selected on the right-hand side. Now, the first row in my table, I don't want to be the alternate colour. I want it to be transparent. So what I'm going to do is make sure I have that selected in the structure preview, and in the cell formats I'm going to apply the standard row format. Then I go back to my structure. In the third one, that one is the alternate row, so I'm going to apply the row alt cell format to it. And click OK. Will it work? Sort of, not quite. OK, we've got a few problems going on there. The most obvious of which is it thinks now, instead of alternating between transparent and pale blue, we want the darker blue brought into the mix, and we don't. So back to edit. And the way to fix that is to tell it that this top cell, we only want one row, that colour. We do not want that repeating with the other two. How we do that is using the header arrow here. As we move that down, what we're saying is everything above the dotted line is our header. Everything below that dotted line we want repeated for the rest of the table. That will solve one of our problems. OK to that, we now have a header on it. But I know, and you know, that I specifically said I wanted that text to be white. And I wanted it to use the text style called table body headings. Why is it not white? And that is because when I pasted that information in from Excel, it pasted with it what's called local formatting. If we look at the font again, you can see we're back to ? Aptos. So this table has some local formatting. And despite the fact that we applied a table format to it, we only applied a table format to it. There was one thing we didn't do, and that was override the local formatting. But we can do that. With it selected, go back into the lower burger menu, and you'll see you have Apply Alternate Rows, and also Apply Alternate Rows Override Local. What that will do is take away any manually applied local formatting. And now it's positively perfect. When it comes to changing that table format, you have a couple of options. I use global colours. So if I wanted to change the row colours, I could edit the fill of the global colour, and as I do that, we get a totally different look. Doesn't look particularly great, I'll grant you, so let's take it back to where it was. That's one way. The other way is editing the table format Let's say, for example, we wanted 2 standard rows and only 1 alt row. To do that, we would add an extra row. We would apply the standard row to the top 2 repeating cells, and in the third one we would make that the alt row. And OK. And the table updates automatically. Oh, it's fabulous, isn't it? I'm going to go back into there and change that back, show you how easy that is. Instead of adding this time, I need to take one away. I need this one to be row, and I need the second one to be row alt. And we're back where we were. Another change you might want to make is inside the table, I'm going to add an extra row. And this is where I would put my footer information. For demonstration purposes, I'm just going to put footer row in each of those cells. What if we wanted that footer row formatted differently? To do that, I'm going to go and edit the table format again. I need to add another cell. This bottom one is going to be the footer. I actually do want it to look like the header, but future-proofing the design, I'm going to add another cell format. This one is going to be for the footer. And then I define what that looks like. I will use the dark accent colour. I'll make sure we have no borders on it. I will set the insets to 2 mil, set the vertical position, and I don't want it to be table body because that is black. I want it to be the headings, which is white. If I were to apply that, it wouldn't work. You should be screaming at me, why not? But it doesn't work. It's included it in the repeating elements. And that was because we didn't use the up arrow, which is the footer arrow, and tell it everything below that line, we now have another dotted line, is the footer. If we do that, we now have a proper footer. And the brilliant thing with that is that as we edit the table, although we have the text that says footer row, it knows that the format applies to the last row of the table. Not only when you add rows, but also when you take rows away. So let's get that back to footer row and also show you that even if you were to add rows, the format would still work. So I'm just adding a few rows there. The alternating colour applies and the footer still works. That is absolutely everything you need to know. It's all very well seeing table formats play out in isolation, but what about in real life? What about in a real file? Here is a work in progress furniture catalogue. And there's an inventory table required on page 11. So let's toggle off the placeholder. And I have 2 copies of the table. This first one is unformatted. Selecting the table, copy, move back to the furniture catalogue and paste. And let's drag that across and into place. Now what I would need to do with this is repeat the process from last time. So making sure I've got the entire table selected, I'm going to start formatting this. In the text styles, I have a range of styles available with exactly the same names as the previous file. So let's make sure that table body is applied to the whole of that. Then set the vertical alignment. Make sure in my tables panel I have removed all of the borders and set the insets to 2 millimeters. I can actually format that a little bit more in here if I want to, which is the top row that's going to be the header, select those cells, make that a heading, and apply a fill to it, which is the dark accent colour. The rest of the text I'll set to black 80, which it looks like it's set to. And you could at this stage apply the alternating colours. So selecting those rows, and in the fill, choosing the light accent colour. At this stage, if I were to make changes, everything would break. It's not a table format yet. But with the table selected, up to the table formats, burger menu, add format from selection, and then let's go and look what it's managed to create. So editing format 1, first thing I'm going to do is rename it. This time it did more for us than the first demo, where I manually showed you how to create the header row. But because there is a header row, it's automatically managed to do that itself. It's got the header arrow in the right place. It has followed that with the standard row and then the alt row. In here, if I click the top one, you can see it's format 3. It would make sense to call that header. The next one is format 4, which is our row. And the last one is the alt row. And you are done. You have a reusable table format should you need more tables in this document. That example included a table that was unformatted. But what's the situation if your source table is already formatted? I'm going to turn this one off and show you a formatted inventory table. It's not correctly formatted, but it's formatted. With it selected, I'm going to copy that table, move to our furniture catalogue and paste it in. And then drag it across to the right-hand side. Now it's almost the right width, but there are problems with this. We'll get it the right width first. Getting it the right height is going to be a bit of a game. But you should technically just drag the bottom and drag it up to that pink line, and that should be fine. Only it's not, is it? It jumps around. Why is it jumping around? It might look possessed, and it's certainly acting like it's possessed, but there's good news. It's not possessed. That is what happens when you add content to a file with a baseline grid enabled. It might not look like there's a baseline grid enabled, but trust me, there is. The button on the toolbar with the blue lines enables you to see the baseline grid manager. Let's bring that on. You can see baseline grid, use a baseline grid. But the baseline grid is not showing. If we show it and then close that dialog and zoom into it, you can see actually now it starts to make sense. Where the text is, it certainly isn't right in the table, but it is correct according to the baseline grid. But we can't leave it looking like that. So what do we do instead? I'm going to turn off the view of the baseline grid. We now know what the problem is. And what I'm going to do is making sure the table's selected, use the table panel, and within the frame section at the top of the table panel, we have an option to ignore the baseline grid. Put a tick in there and sanity is restored. Now I can stretch that out to the pink margins there and everything is fine. The formatting, however, is not fine, but at least the size is right. Now we did create a table format in here. We could apply that table format. So clicking it, it applies it. What I do when I'm doing this is not just click it though. I make sure from the lower burger menu that I do override any local formatting just in case. And that did make a difference. It changed the text from being black to being black 80. So always look out for that local formatting. And that is how you manage the formatting of rows in tables in Affinity Publisher. Next time, we'll be looking at the formatting of table columns, so don't miss it. Now though, let's have a quick recap. You can manually apply alternate row colours, but they don't update when the table is changed. Alternate row colours can be automated via table formats. It could be every other row, but you can get as granular as you like with that. You can also add header rows and add footer rows. You need to remember to apply the table format and not just create it. Formatting for tables comes from both the table format you create and text styles. They work together. Beware the impact of enabling a baseline grid, but tables can be set to ignore the baseline grid. If you want new tutorials and tips and tricks on a regular basis, check out my free training at elainegiles.com/VIP. Hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss future tutorials. And if you have any requests for specific tutorials, be sure to contact me. I would love to hear from you. Thanks for watching and see you next time.